Hello, how are you today? It's Tuesday. Can you believe it's already Tuesday? You know, we all want today's audience to become tomorrow's audience, don't we? The best way to meet that goal is to develop a loyal following that truly has a connection with us and vice versa. My guest today, author, pastor, speaker, and motorcycle rider, Tim Riter, tells us what he's including in book number 10, due out next April, to pre-market book number 11 and strengthen his already strong connection to his audience. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgan, the Christian Message Coach, and this is Marketers on a Mission. We offer tutorials and interviews to help Christian writers and speakers take their message online. This is episode number 107, author Tim Riter, how he's pre-marketing his sequel. Hello, Tim. How are you?
I'm better than I deserve, Patricia. And yourself?
Author Tim Riter. I like that. Better than I deserve. That's the first time I've heard that.
It's a great way to inject grace in conversations.
Yes, it is. It's immediately gets your attention. It's not one of those old, worn-out cliches.
I'm so tired of those things.
I think that Christ is too, don't you, Tim?
Pardon?
I think that Christ is tired of cliches as well, don't you?
I think so. There was a book years ago about wineskins by Keith Miller, and we need to make everything fresh, that the old ways don't work forever. And we need to kind of tweak our lives, tweak how, not the core message, but how we deliver it over and over again. So, and cliches it's sloppy thinking, it's sloppy speaking, and it bores people. And there's no greater sin than to bore people when you talk about God.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. So now you've ridden over 170,000 miles, which I can't even comprehend, on your motorcycle rides through 44 states. But that doesn't even include, if I'm not mistaken, the 6,000 miles that you just got finished riding recently. It was July, wasn't it?
Correct. Had a 2-week long trip, covered 11 states, 2 provinces, 2 countries, total of 6,000 miles. And on the first day, did what's known in biker lingo as an iron butt. It's 1,000 miles in one day on 2 wheels. And I can honestly say my butt was not iron. It was numb and tingling the whole time.
How long does it take to travel 1,000 miles in one day with all the factors involved?
Well, I kind of chose the route pretty good. Our town, Temecula in Southern California, is right on Interstate 15. I was going to meet a friend up in Butte, Montana, that's also on Interstate 15. So I looked at what's the closest town that had a motel was Shelby, Montana. That was 1,080 miles. So took off at about 4 in the morning and rode total of 16.4 hours. And then at 8:20 my time, is about 9:20 local time, pulled into the Motel 6 in Shelby. It was delightful.
How many hours did you sleep that night?
Enough. It was probably nine hours in that ballpark. That caught up a little bit on the earlier side. I don't normally get up at 4 in the morning. So maybe 9 that night.
You had some stunning photographs from the various wildlife you saw and the sights. Tell us a little bit about that, please.
I think one of the things that struck me the most, the sights, was up above Banff in the Canadian Rockies. We're at a place called Bow Lake. There's a Crowfoot Glacier that came down between a saddle of 2 peaks. And I looked, and off to the right, there's this massive chunk of rock, one of the mountains. I think that was Crowfoot Mountain. And you can see the strata that were laid down and forming it. And the strata, when they're formed, are flat. They're level. They're horizontal. But these were up at about a 45-degree angle, and then they bent. And it just totally impressed me with the power that God has put within the world to push all that rock straight up, to twist it, and it bends without breaking. And at that same point, I looked down, and there are about half a dozen multicolored wildflowers all around. They're maybe 1/4 of an inch across with all the colors of the rainbow. And look at the massiveness of what God created, and also the delicacy. It says so much about who God is and what he can do. I've got another book idea called God Knows His Stuff. And that God, if he made all of that, he knows what he can do, and he can handle our lives. So in part, being out on the road, especially on the bike, you're immersed in the world, you're not hidden from it. And you see God's glory and his majesty and his love in a remarkably fresh way.
Now, you started riding when you were riding, not writing, when you were nearly graduated from college. What caused that? I mean, you've been doing it all these years. What caused that thread to continue? Most people come and go, or they do it when they're young and then they drop off.
Yeah, they go down once and they quit. My roommate and I were planning on going up to Canada to see a friend of ours, take my car, a little Falcon Futura. And about a week before the semester ended, a lady in the freeway hit me, and I didn't trust the car. And then Mark realized he couldn't afford it. Then to take a break from studies, that one of the guys said, "Hey, let's go see a movie." And they said, Easy Rider. And I'd ridden a trail bike once. It was okay, but just okay. And being out in nature on a bike, it wasn't the sex and drugs that were part of it that attracted me, that were part of that movie, Easy Rider. There's the freedom of the open road. And so I ended up working a couple of months, bought a Honda 350, took off for Canada, and it changed my life. That hooked me. The first little Trail 90 interested me. Seeing Easy Rider intrigued me, but I was totally enchanted by being on a bike and riding. So it's nearly 240,000 miles now on bikes. And on that last trip, I got 3 more states. I'm up to 46 on 2 wheels.
That's just amazing. Do you think you're going to go to Alaska and Hawaii on 2 wheels?
I've got Hawaii already.
Okay.
My wife and I went to timeshare, and I went to a local Harley-Davidson dealer, borrowed a little bike they used to loan out for taking tests. So I got Hawaii. I need Alaska, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And
well, come on down.
Yeah. We met some guys from Pennsylvania, somewhere in North Dakota, at a rest stop, just got talking that they're on bikes. And there's a place you can ride to. It's about only 2,400 miles from my house in Hyder, Alaska. So I may try and put that together, or take a cruise with my wife and then hop over and borrow a bike again.
Does she have the same passion? Does she enjoy bike riding with you, motorcycle riding with you?
Probably not as much as I do, and she did tremendously for a long time. We took a ride out to Kansas to visit her mom on the bike. We didn't let her mom know we were on the bike because she would have freaked. We pulled up in the front yard, and she walks out and almost fainted on us. But she had an awful lot of riding in the early years. Her back is kind of, it goes out easily now. So she can't ride because of her back. But she was a great biker chick for a long, long time.
Well, you've got some great pictures, and I know that through the years, you've probably got many, many, many more stacked in boxes or in photo books or somewhere in your home.
We've got a lot, and one of the things we're looking at to market the new book coming out, God, a Motorcycle, the Open Road, in April, is the possibility of putting a lot of those pictures on with a little blurb of where they're from and which trip. So we may be doing that to incorporate a lot of the pictures we have. Wow.
Will that be cost prohibitive for the publishing costs?
We'll make it a website.
Oh, I see. Now I got you.
They would go probably to my blog site, the website I've got, and I'll put the pictures on it.
Yes.
As far as the book, it would be tremendously expensive.
People love to be a part of, if they can't go on the adventure, they like to be a part of someone else's, don't they?
I'm amazed at that. I really am. That, I noticed, though, I follow friends when they put their travel pictures up, and the number of folks that have traveled along voyeuristically, it astounds me. And they talk about how they grieve when the trip's over. And actually, I'm kind of relieved when the trip's over, because this last one especially was the second longest of my life. I took one that was 13,000 miles, 31 states, but I was only like 27 then, 26. And, at 26, you do anything. But it's a little bit different as you put a few years and a few miles on your body.
Yes, so true, so true. We always think we're going to be the exception, but we're not.
No, there are none. Nobody gets out of here alive, except for a couple in the Old Testament.
Your online bio, excuse me, says that you have 2 master's degrees, and it also says that you rappelled off of a 190-foot bridge with only 100 feet of rope. Now that doesn't make sense to me. How could you do that with 2 master's degrees?
Okay, see, education doesn't mean common sense. Okay, the two are not equated to start with. But I was living in Taos, New Mexico then, and one of the guys was a big mountain rock climber and rappeller. And there's a tower that goes up 100 feet of concrete at the Rio Grande Gorge Bridge, and then iron lattice work the other 90. So there's a special knot that climbers know, that as long as you've got tension on the rope, it's solid. But you can kind of flip it, release the tension, and it comes loose. So 6 of us rappelled down to the tower. We hung on to that. He flipped the rope, brought it down. Luckily, he didn't drop it. And then we rappelled down the last part. It's one of the most thrilling times of my life. And there's kind of a theme I'm finding in my life. I need challenges. And I came up with a line trying to describe why I did that, especially Iron Butt at age 70. I mean, that's utterly ridiculous. And I realized only when you push your limits do you grasp your true abilities and your courage. But I think as followers, we need to be pushing ourselves. I think anytime that God leads us to a ministry, we often are scared to death. We don't want to do it. A little bit like Jonah in the Old Testament, he had no idea, no desire to do what God said. It pushed him past his comfort zone because they were the enemy. Jonah wanted the Ninevites destroyed, and God wanted them saved. Toughest thing in Jonah's life. It took him 3 days in the belly of that great fish before he finally said, God, okay, I give up. One stubborn dude, but I think we all need, in different ways, to push ourselves, not necessarily to do an iron butt, but to try new things, to love people, to forgive, to go beyond what we think we can do and discover what God with his power in us can do.
And he always opens those doors, doesn't he? We don't have to push them through.
I would say yes and no.
Oh.
God he never told me to do the iron butt ride. I mean, I wish I could claim divine authority on that. That was just wanting to carry out the bucket list and to see if I could do it again. That I did one when I was like 27, 28, maybe I was 28 then, and did an iron butt then, but that was many, many decades back. And I think sometimes it's not only that God gives us a specific push and a nudge, but sometimes he just wants us to challenge ourselves, to not become complacent. And I think a lot of that is up to us. I love the verse in Proverbs, a man's mind plans his path and God directs his steps.
Yes.
And I planned it, and God, a couple of times in the ride, said, you need to take a longer break than you're planning. I'd ridden about 450 miles in about 7 hours. And that's almost half the way, making really good time. And I was tired. So I stopped at Cedar City. I found this cool little restaurant that's an old railroad station, and had lunch and sat around, just kind of rested for about an hour and a half. Because God was kind of saying, you've got a lot yet to do. You better make sure you're rested up for it. So Patricia, it's that blend.
Yes. And listening, whichever way you go, listening to him.
Exactly.
Let me check Facebook, Tim, and see if we have any comments or questions on Facebook. Kathy McDougall is astounded at your mileage. 107. Awesome, she says. Barb Haley says, hey, Patricia and Tim. And another lady named, whose name I cannot pronounce, so forgive me, has joined us. Miss Lawson, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate you being here.
Amen.
So, Tim, now let me ask you. Let me close this down a little bit more, see if we've got any others. No. Okay. Let's check that. You mentioned this, sort of alluded to this a moment ago. You, on your blog, you say that we need to explore new ways to do the old faith. So give me some examples. What do you mean by that? Where are you leading us with that concept, Tim?
Okay, I don't know that I'm leading us anywhere, except there's a verse about one of the tribes, I think it was Issachar in the Old Testament, who understood the times and knew what to do. It's kind of like that old book I mentioned before, A Taste of New Wine by Keith Miller, that the culture has changed. that we had a men's breakfast at our church last Saturday, and the guy did a marvelous way to evangelize and tell people about Jesus, totally based on a sin format, that Christ died for our sins. If you live in a culture that accepts the concept of God and sin, that works. We don't today. That if I talk to someone about you're a sinner, they'll say, says who? We live in an age of relativism. It's all individual. We decide what's right for us, and no one can judge us and say that. If we use the classic, the four spiritual laws, or the gap that Willow Creek did, that doesn't resonate. But we've got people who love stories. And telling our story today is a great way. We've got people that seek truth. And they may not get the idea of sin yet, but if you present the concept of absolute truth and God is true and factual, they'll respond to that. So I think what we've got to do in evangelism is listen, rather than present a canned approach to them. Find out what they believe, what motivates them, what they like, what do they dislike. And then we present the same God in terms that they can understand and be drawn to. Worship. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Paul did that, didn't he?
Exactly. To the Jews, I became like a Jew. To the Greeks, I became like a Greek. But sometimes the older Christians think we're selling out the gospel, and it's not. Rick Warren, Pastor Saddleback, is an example. Has gotten a lot of flack of it's too person-centered. But his book, The Purpose-Driven Life, says it's not about you. What Rick has done, he came to California, not as a California guy, but he understood the culture and crafted a church that would speak to the people in the language they understood. Little things, and it's typical now. He wore a Hawaiian shirt and a pair of jeans or Dockers, when back then pastors had to wear suits and ties, and a vest was probably really good. The Jesus movement that I was involved with quite a bit introduced contemporary music to the church, where in otherwise we're singing hymns that Martin Luther done hundreds of years before. Ironically, those were tunes sung in the beer halls, and he put Christian words to them, and he got all sorts of flack, but then we revere them as the hymns of the church.
That's right.
And we've got to do the same thing. There's a neat movement out called Beer and Hymns, where people will gather at a brew pub on a Sunday night every couple of months and sing hymns. It's the coolest way to expose people who often would never go to church to that God is real. There's some really good songs we can sing about him. So I think we need to do in our life and our culture, be willing to try new things that are compatible. In Romans 14:15, Paul makes a distinction between biblical gospel absolutes and matters of opinion. Methods tend to be more opinion. So we find out what methods work and we go with them, whether it's worship, evangelism, even how we start conversations with our neighbor. Like that phrase where you said, how are you? I said, better than I deserve. I usually get people say, oh no, you deserve the best. I said, no, I don't. I know what I deserve. That's to be post-toasty. But God gives me far more than I deserve.
Yes,
so we've got to be creative.
And the truth stands up no matter what method you're using.
Exactly. There's a core of absolute truth at the heart of life. And God's behind that. And that's going to come out. We just present it in a way that's most effective at that time with that person.
Yes, yes. Excuse me. I wanted to talk about your book in just a moment, but first I want to ask you, when I'm looking at the long list of books that you've already written, 9 are already on the shelf and written, you know, they've been, some of them, 1994 was your first one. Am I remembering correctly?
Right. Yes.
So when I'm looking at those and then reading several of your blog posts, you're a deep thinker, are you, Tim?
I would say I want to be a fresh thinker. I want to look at what's behind. You know, it's funny that back in high school, they made me take a speech course. I was so bad at it. My knees made more noise than my voice did giving a book report in junior high. The first day, the teacher said, if anyone wants to get on a speech course, my hand went up before he even said, what, join the debate team. And I blew it. On the speech course, I would have taught 3 times. I did like 60 times the debate. I didn't know you had to go to tournaments. And every tournament you'd have 8 to 10. I was an idiot. But I was taught in debate to look below the surface, not to just what is being said or the values that drive it. So in that sense, I want to be a little bit deeper. I want to be fresh. I want to not take things at face value, but to probe a little bit. One of the things that I developed while teaching English at a school here in Temecula, when you read the words of an author, think of three levels. At the top are the words, the stories. Underneath are the author's values. And those values always percolate up into the story and the words. Mm-hmm. But then as followers of Jesus, we didn't realize there's a third level, that's God's values. Mm-hmm. And the God's values go up into the author's values that go into the words. Our job as thoughtful people, as thoughtful followers of Christ who want to be transformed by our mind, is to probe below the words, what values does the author have, and then are they compatible with God's? So I want to probe deeper. I'll acknowledge that.
You cause us to ponder, and we don't just read your words and then go off to the next website. We think and sit and ponder and think of the deeper things and what you said earlier, a fresh approach to, and I really love that because we are in a rut culturally and individually. It's we're so easy to fall into a rut. So what you do is bring that breath of fresh air back in and say, let's look at this a different way. Can we get the same results using a different method? And then you energize us to go do that. That's a pretty full picture, pretty full package, Tim.
I appreciate those, sir. Patricia, I'm sorry. I appreciate those words. And it's so cool to know that what you're hoping and aiming for are coming through in people's lives, to look at it fresh. One of the things I want to do with the blog, Unconventional, is very similar of look at everyday events and show there's a spiritual hook there.
Yes.
We often think of God as Sunday morning, maybe Saturday night at our church, maybe a midweek Bible study or a small group, but God ought to be involved in every little event of life. Romans 14, I think it's 23, says anything not done from faith is sin. Or we can do the right thing, but if it's not an expression of faith, we're missing the mark. We're not seeing what God has in life for us. So what I want to do is help people to see, especially with not just with the biker book, that's on biker stories, but what I want to do, and you may not know this at all, work with my agent and also some people at Harvest House are bringing it out. I want to get a whole new type of devotion. I'm calling them adventure devotions that are story driven. One of the ideas is Lamborghini lessons. I had a chance a year ago to ride a Lamborghini on a closed road course. It was one of the most awesome experiences. As my wife and I were driving back in a little Honda Accord, I mean, nothing at all like a Lamborghini Gallardo 550. And I'm saying, gosh, this is what I did here is like the Christian life. And I end up with like 50 different things from that. So one of the book ideas is Lamborghini lessons, driving fast, driving well. I'm working with Don Otis on high country adventures. We ought to see God's touch in every aspect of life. How do I bring glory to God? How do I express His character in it? And that's what I want to do with Unconventional.
Okay, I would like to have that book. Let me know when it's ready because I want to get that book.
I will tell you as soon as it comes out.
Now, in April of next year, your latest book is coming out, God, a Motorcycle and the Open Road. Tell us about the concept of that. It sounds obvious, but draw us into it, please.
Yeah, it's funny. I had that idea for a biker devotion years ago, got no interest at all, and I put it in the back shelf. And then my agent was talking to Todd, one of the editors at Harvest House, and he had a couple of ideas. We put proposals together, and he said, they're not quite what we need right now. But he looked at my blog and he said, I see Tim rides motorcycles. Does he have a biker devotion? And bingo, we just recrafted a little bit and he bought it. And the idea is, especially with the bike, is to learn to trust in God. It's got a lot of stories. Every devotion is like a one-page story to start, and then about 2 more pages of applying that to life. And so most people don't ride. A lot do, but people can enjoy the stories and they can see God's glory and majesty when you're immersed in His creation.
That's right. That is right. So you have this, what I think is a brilliant marketing technique. It's not totally unique to the world, and it doesn't fit for everyone's nonfiction book, but I just think it's fantastic So tell us what this great marketing technique is that you're going to actually pre-market book number 11 inside book number 10, which comes out in April.
It's kind of a cool thing. I never heard of it. So if others are doing it, more power to them. They beat me to it. But I wanted to do another book on bikers. I've got a lot of stories on motorcycling, and people love this. When I take the bike trips, I put a post on Facebook. Those are followed more than anything else I do. Mm-hmm. So there's interest in it. I thought, what would I do for another biker book? And I always want to kind of look ahead, what's next down the road. And I thought I could do another one of just my stories, but if I could do if the first book could be one that gets people's attention, to do a lot of marketing myself, Harvest House wants to do a lot. We're going to contact all the major Christian motorcycle groups in the country and expose it to them. Yes. I'm going to do all these Facebook Live things I've never done before. Mm-hmm. But then I thought, if I could get people to tell their story for about half the stories in it, if I get someone, say from Atlanta, Georgia, who leads motorcycle ministry, to tell his story, his name's going to be in a book. His story will be. And then we've got that broadened. And I've got a guy, Murray Purett, great writer, pastor. Love the guy. I just met him on Facebook. And Murray told his story. He was at a karaoke place, met a bunch of outlaw bikers. And they'd talk a little bit distant. They knew he was a Christian, so they kind of kept some space. He got up and sang Born to Be Wild, that Steppenwolf tune. Get your motor running, head out on the highway, looking for adventure, whatever comes at will. I sing that myself before every trip. Every road trip, as I'm right along the first couple blocks, I'm singing Born to Be Wild. Murray got up, sang that song, and all of a sudden, these guys saw a common bond. Yes. And he began to be able to share his faith. So Murray is another group. I want that story to be in there. I've already talked to Murray about it. I've got maybe 14 people in mind at this point. And I just want to broaden it. It's kind of like, I've never thought of this metaphor, the analogy, but you've got the sun at the middle of the solar system. You've got all these planets. What I'd like to do is have that first book to be at the center, and then by reaching people all over, to get a solar system built around biker devotion. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that. I love that. You can stay, your core is in place, and you can branch out as opportunities arise and grow both your audience, your books, and help people all along the way in areas that may not have been accessible to the gospel before.
Exactly. I want to go beyond the ones I know. We're going to have a line at the very end of the book of saying, if you liked this book, if it benefited you, if you found value in it, if you would like to, if you're a biker, would like to add a biker story, the next book, half of them will be stories of other people. So send your story to blank, blank, blank. I'll say, give my email address, timriter@aol.com, and we'll try and get yours in. So I'm hoping it'll be something that just grows and grows.
I don't see how it couldn't. I mean, I'm not a specialist in this area, but I just don't see how it couldn't fly off the shelves. Who wouldn't have access? Who would normally have access to have their name in a book and their story? That's just so intriguing right off the bat. And then the topic is something that they love and that you love and the readers will be interested in. It just seems like a win-win-win all the way around.
That's my hope and prayer, Patricia. It really is that. And not just another biker book, but that would go into that whole, as I mentioned before, the adventure devotions. Devotions that are story-driven and have some substance. You know, so many of the devos, I hate to say it, but they're kind of shallow and syrupy. Yeah. You almost get spiritual diabetes from reading them. They're affirming, they make you feel good, they don't change you. And I want to challenge people with it. So we've got enough content. It's short enough for people to read, but it'll have some real content. I loved where you mentioned you can sit and ponder and chew on it and think about it. And we'll always have a little, on the biker book, we've got a thing, kickstarting the application. An allusion to the old way you used to have to kickstart a bike. Uh-huh. And I give some questions for people to ponder and apply to their lives. I try not to give answers there.
Yes.
But just say, figure out this principle, how it touches your life.
Do you think that you will just indefinitely continue riding the motorcycle?
Riding it?
Riding it. Mm-hmm.
Riding, I think so. That one of the guys in our group that takes trips is 78. He had prostate cancer this last year and got weak, and then he had another thing. And he's still riding. He's got to keep his days to like 350 miles. So Mick Byers, if you're out there, you're on TV. But I admire Mick for that. So I am thinking of changing my motorcycle. I've got a Honda ST 1300. It's a sport touring. It's really fast. I've noticed the last 2 years, my balance and reaction time aren't quite what I'd like them to be, what they used to be. And the ST is so fast, it tempts me to go beyond my limits. And so I may shift to a Goldwing. I don't know, but I think the Goldwing will be able to extend the riding a little bit. But I hope I will ride as long as God lets me keep it up.
Well, you mentioned one word there that I understood about the type of Goldwing. I understand that. I have a visual picture, not having a motorcycle background myself. So the other things are beyond the scope, the other types of motorcycles that you list specifically, but I know that other people they're getting that visual picture for every single motorcycle type that you're mentioning. Let me check and see if we have any other questions or comments, Tim. And would you be available if we have comments or questions that people might want to ask? Would you be able to stick around for just a moment and see if anybody has any follow-up questions?
I would be glad to.
Okay. So the book comes out in April, God, a Motorcycle, and the Open Road. And it is number 10, soon to be followed by number 11. Do you foresee, before we go, foresee another topic? You had mentioned the devotionals. Anything else more overarching, reaching out into a different sphere of influence?
I think we've got, of the devotions, I've got 10 different ones in mind. So there's a lot in that line. And I've got another one, I mentioned it briefly, God Knows His Stuff, in that I see it as 2 parts. And I would want to come in with that after the 2 biker devotions go in. I've also got one on beer called That Divine Draft. No, That Divine Brew, Drafting Spiritual Lessons from Beer. But if I can get a couple of those, then what I'd like it to do is God Knows His Stuff. We live in a world that discounts God. We think we're better than He is. And the first half of the book will look at the classic attributes of God, His omnipotence, His love, omnipresence. Then the other will look at the more delicate ones, the ones that aren't as visible, things like His love of beauty. The first group, we can't copy them. We can follow them and trust Him. The second, we can copy His love of beauty, His connection, how He, the Son, and the Spirit are all connected as one, where we need to be in community. So that's the next big classic nonfiction book I have. But I've got probably 20 different book ideas. I don't know that I'll live long enough to write them all.
Yeah, rolling around. I love your titles. Do you come up with those?
Nearly all of them. I didn't come up with God, a Motorcycle, the Open Road. I was calling it Easy Riding, in allusion to the old film, but I think they're totally correct in changing it, in that not enough today know about the film Easy Rider. I would have tweaked one thing, that they called it God, a Motorcycle, the Open Road. I would have flipped it, of a motorcycle, the open road, and God, because I want everything to end up pointing to God. It ends up with God. And knowing the market and the audience, they said people are more apt to buy it if it starts with God, and that's totally good. But I think my thought is that it all ends with God.
Wow, I have certainly enjoyed talking to you today and listening to your stories. You have energized me.
I'm so glad, Patricia. I appreciate you having me on. This has been a neat interview, and I love what you're doing. Keep it up.
Oh, thank you so very much. Thank you very much. So, viewers, thank you as well. Thank you for being with us today. Tim Riter and me, as we have delivered Marketers on a Mission, episode number 107, author Tim Riter, how he's pre-marketing his sequel. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern, David Winters, the author, is going to join me. And it just so happens that his book is going to launch tomorrow. So, Taking God to Work, that he has co-authored with Pastor Steve Reynolds. David is a fun interview. He's very knowledgeable, lots of personality, because he's a humorist as well. He used to be a government employee for 20 years, and he's a humorist. What an odd mix, isn't it, Tim?
Totally weird.
Uh, you will certainly enjoy that. That's right here tomorrow at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. Until then, I appreciate you being here. I'm Patricia Durgan, the Christian Message Coach, and this is Marketers on a Mission. Online marketing can be hard. I pray that this show makes it easier so your message can reach around the world for Christ. Thanks for being here. See you tomorrow.